Ron DeSantis will soon deliver his State of the State address. He's set to outline his agenda and highlight his possible 2024 presidential campaign. It's unclear when exactly the leader of the state of Florida could announce his official bid for the White House. Here to discuss is Jim DeFede. He's an investigative reporter with CBS News Miami. So, Jim, what are you hearing about what we can expect from the governor today?
Well, I wouldn't hold my breath for a presidential announcement in today's State of the State address. I think he's made it pretty clear that he wants to get through the start of the legislative session. Matter of fact, the entire legislative session, which will run about 60 days, maybe a little longer. So I'd be looking for an announcement formally sometime after May, say. But today what we're expecting to hear is, again, his argument, which is essentially his campaign, that he can do for the rest of the country what he's done for Florida. So it's going to be a speech in which he highlights what he perceives are his successes here in Florida and why that's a recipe for others to follow.
And one of his successes is, and I'll quote, woke is where Florida is where woke goes to die, right? So that's, you know, that's kind of like what we've been hearing from some of his speeches. How is that, playing out with voters?
You know, if anyone could ever give me a definition from Ron DeSantis's world as to what woke is, it's become a term that has no meaning. And I think it just basically is a phrase used to describe those who feel aggrieved by something. And so, yeah, we're going to hear what we're likely to hear, though, is that this legislative session that the governor kicks off with his State of the State address is going to have a lot of the same red meat issues, though, that we've seen in previous sessions. Expect a bill about abortion. Now, 2 years ago, Florida had an abortion ban at 24 weeks. Last session, they dropped it to 15. This year, the governor has said he'd be willing to sign a bill that lowered the abortion to 6 weeks. No abortions after 6 weeks. So you can expect that. There is a massive school voucher program, basically trying to rewrite education in Florida by allowing any parent, anytime, anywhere, to take the dollars out of the state and use those to educate their kids, including homeschooling. So you could be paid by the state to educate your children at home. There's going to be a lot of other bills. We're going to see a permitless carry bill, in other words, so that people in Florida don't have to get a concealed weapons permit. A lot of red meat issues are on the table this session.
So, Jim, let me ask you, just away from the politics, what the impression of most Floridians in political circles is of the governor in terms of that X factor that generally those who run for the presidency, most will look back on history at the roster of American presidents and say they did have something, either charisma, Ronald Reagan, charismatic, former governor of the state of California, charismatic, but also folksy, tough. Bill Clinton, that folksy, I feel your pain. What do people think about Ron DeSantis? Because one of the things that is often said is that, on the stage in Florida, it works for Florida. But when you have to take this show nationally, his prickliness with the press, with even members of his own constituents, when he scolded high schoolers for wearing masks, that might not translate to a national audience. What do people say?
So I think there's a valid point to be made that you're making, which is, Ron DeSantis has enjoyed a bubble here in Florida. He doesn't interact with press he considers to be legacy press or mainstream press. He usually only appears on safe news outlets like Fox or Newsmax. How his act plays outside of Florida is truly going to be the real test. We can all remember President Jeb Bush, President Scott Walker, President Marco Rubio. They were all
President Mitt Romney.
Right. Well, they were all being hailed as the next incarnate, the person on the clear pathway to the presidency. It's a little different when you actually get out into the rough and tumble. But to your very first part of your question, which was how do people perceive him and what is the brand that he's running on? He's running as someone who fights. And that's really his message. I'm willing to fight for you. Now, the question becomes, who is the you in that sentence? Is it truly all Floridians? Is it all Americans? Or is it those that tend to look and act and speak like he does? And so that's the real challenging point. But he's turned pugilism into an art form. He basically took what Donald Trump was doing in terms of populist grievance politics and taken it to a new level. And that's really his message, is that he's someone who will fight the press. He was someone who will fight the Democrats. He will fight corporations, and he's doing it all for the people. Again, which people is the fundamental question that critics often point to.
So it sounds an awful lot like Donald Trump without the Donald Trump. He chose not to go to CPAC, whereas Donald Trump did. And I wondered about sort of the two tracks that these two men are on. Any insight into why he didn't go to CPAC, other than to maybe start, shaking that money tree and raising money for a potential campaign?
Well, first, money's not going to be a problem for Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis has several dozen billionaires already on speed dial who have been pumping money into his governor's campaign, just this past year, and now already poised to donate a large sum of money to his presidential run. So money's not the issue. CPAC has become essentially an extension of Donald Trump. As you saw by the list of speakers who were there, Matt Schlapp, who runs the American Conservative Union, that runs CPAC. He's someone who is an acolyte for Donald Trump. And so Ron DeSantis saw no real point in going to CPAC because he knew he could potentially be heckled by the pro-Trump group. That's also why Mike Pence didn't appear at CPAC. Nikki Haley received a pretty cool reception at CPAC. So, Ron DeSantis likes to picks where he moves into, and he just didn't want to play in CPAC's world.
Jim DeFede, thank you so much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.